Cam Fam! Today I'm gonna answer a lot of your nagbabagang questions about all the different requirements we had to do in order to travel across Europe. But before we start, please make sure you're already subscribed and you click on that bell button so you're always notified whenever I have new videos like this one. Okay, so I've got my cheat sheet over here because I really don't want to forget all the different requirements that we had to do in order to travel across Europe. You guys have been sending me so many DMs asking me about the requirements or how is it that we got to travel here and there. Did we have to do this and that? So this vlog will answer all your questions. And if I'm not able to answer them, then just leave a comment below and I'll try my best to answer them there. Okay, so when we first left the Philippines, it was around August, mid-August. And so requirements then are very different to the requirements now. So at that time, around July, I think, was the time that we started processing our papers in order to go to Finland, which is where Yanni is from. During that time, Finland specifically, and a lot of European countries actually, were not really open to tourists yet or to tourism. And they were only open to European citizens and their family members, which is where I fall. So Sienna and Yanni are both Finnish citizens. I am a Filipino citizen. And so in order for me to be able to enter the country with them, I still had to get a visa, a spousal visa. My tourist visa was already expired by then. So I got a spousal visa through VFS here in the Philippines, which handles all these matters for Finland here. And we couldn't bring Yeye because Yeye technically isn't a family member, although we count her as a family member. In the eyes of Finland, she is not a family member. So that is why we were not able to travel with her. So in order for us to leave, of course, I think Yanni already talked about this, all the requirements that we had to do for Sienna and all the different requirements that we had to fix before we fly out. So I'm gonna put a link down below to Yanni's video just so you guys can see. But again, I want to remind everyone that this was during July, August, so it's very, very different now compared to the times then. Countries have started to open up more, there are less requirements now. Although swab tests are not officially required, according to the online sources that we referred to, it's not required by the airline we flew out with, which is Turkish Airlines. It wasn't required by Turkey when you're in transit because we're only going there in transit. It wasn't required by Finland. At that time, if I understand correctly, it wasn't a requirement at the airport. Yanni and I still got swab tests because we wanted to be extra sure. We didn't want our trip to not push through just because we weren't able to fulfill a requirement. So we still got swab tests even though it wasn't present in any of the websites that we researched. Good thing we did because when we got to the airport, the guards were actually asking for swab tests results prior to entry to the airport. So we were able to show that. I don't know what would have happened if we didn't have any swab tests on hand. Good thing that we had it. And then by the time we got to the check-in counter, they did ask for the swab tests again, but we didn't show them our swab tests. We just showed them our WHO vaccine passports. So that's also something that we went ahead and applied for. I don't know if it's the same case now, but during the time that we were applying for the WHO vaccine passports, it was very, very difficult to get appointments to get the vaccine passports. But much like the Philippine passport system, you just need to be patient and you need to keep checking at odd hours because all of a sudden something opened up and we were able to get our WHO vaccine passport appointments. And so this really came in handy because it's what we showed at the check-in counter, so she didn't really have to look at our swab tests anymore. In case you're wondering what a WHO passport looks like, it looks like this. It's a yellow passport and inside it has your information and also what the brand of your vaccine is, what lot number it came from, who administered it, where you got it, and so on and so forth. So we decided to get this because WHO is internationally recognized, and because we're traveling internationally, we got it even though it's not really a requirement on any of the countries that we were going to at that time. But we still got it because we also were considering that we were going to be gone for a long time, and who knows, rules might change. By the time we come back to the Philippines, there might be a rule that you need to have this. That's why we really again wanted to be so thorough that we still got our WHO passports, which I would highly recommend because they came in very, very handy, and you will know why later on as I tell more of these requirements. We also brought our vaccine cards, our local vaccine cards that we got from the LGU, also certificates that we got from the LGU again. So we were really very thorough. We brought all of them and they were all here in this blue folder. Again, all of this Yanni talked about on his vlog prior to flying. Although we didn't really use any of these local vaccination certificates and proofs. We only used the WHO passports when we were abroad. By the time we flew out of the Philippines, a lot of the countries in Europe were not open yet. But by August, Finland was already open to tourists, but only to vaccinated tourists, if I remember correctly. And Finland, much like, well, the entire European Union actually, a lot of you guys are asking which vaccines do they accept. They accept all WHO approved vaccines. So this actually, if I am not mistaken, includes Sinovac or Sinovac. I don't know how you guys pronounce it, but you guys know what it is. Okay, so then prior to entry to Finland, so yeah, we already had our visas and stuff like that, we still had to answer an online form. Much of these countries, they have their own versions of online forms. For Finland, they also had an online form called the Fin Entry Online Form. So this is where you'll fill up all the details. It also asks you all your vaccination details if ever you do have any. And then it will also tell you if you need to quarantine or not. Finland at that time was on self-quarantine. So they would tell you that, okay, you need to do a self-quarantine. They don't really have mandatory quarantine facilities like here in the Philippines. So it's all honesty system. Honesty is the best policy. So for us, after filling up the forms, well, Yoni filled up the form for me and for him, none for Sienna because Sienna is a minor under 7. And minors under 7 don't really need to fill up the Fin entry form. They fall under the parents' forms. So after he filled those forms up for us, it gave us a result that we didn't need to quarantine and we were free to go directly to wherever we wanted to go in Finland. That was basically it for Finland. When in terms of requirements, at that time they were already lifting a lot of their restrictions. We weren't really required to wear masks anymore. Masks weren't mandatory outdoors. They also weren't mandatory indoors. They were only mandatory if you're in a public transportation system. So the bus or the metro or the subway and taxis, Ubers, then you're required to wear your mask. But other than that, it's all free and willing if you want. It's all voluntary. But what I did observe though is that a lot of the Finns were voluntarily wearing masks indoors. Outdoors, no one, like practically maybe 90% of people wearing masks outdoors, but indoors, around, 95% of the people were wearing masks indoors, even though they're not mandatory, which says a lot about the Finnish people. Originally, I was actually supposed to go to the States for New York Fashion Week from Finland, but at that time it wasn't really possible because US put a ban against the European Union because of COVID-19. So at that time I couldn't enter unless I was able to get the NIE, which is the National Interest Exception. And they were very, very, very strict with who they would give this to. And me going to Fashion Week just doesn't really cut it. So I stayed in Finland, and then our next stop was Italy for Fashion Week, but also just to spend time there. Italy was much, much more confusing because they have their own system. They have their own EU certificate. So basically, the EU has this EU COVID system, which is a way for all the countries within the European Union to be able to verify your vaccination status. You have to just do this all online, and if you're within the EU COVID system, then it's easy for them to verify this within all the different countries. So with Italy, they had this thing called Green Pass, and prior to flying, Yoni was already checking all these different websites, and he thought that WHO vaccine passport was already enough for us to be able to do all sorts of things in Italy. But apparently, Italy required this Green Pass, or if you don't have that, then you need the EU Digital COVID Certificate. He thought that because we had the WHO and this is of international standards, they would accept this because WHO is international. But then Italy actually makes use of their own app, and that's what they use in all these different restaurants and museums. And this app only recognizes certain QR codes. So even if the WHO vaccine passport has a QR code, it doesn't really recognize it. So we still had to get a Green Pass or an EU Digital COVID Certificate. Although we didn't have them prior to entry to Italy, because we only found this out after we got to Italy, hoping that our WHO vaccine passports would be good enough. But how are we able to enter? We just basically showed our WHO vaccine passports before flying to Italy, and that was acknowledged by the check-in counter in Finland going to Italy. And then when we landed to Italy, there was also no checks. No one really checked our papers. No one really checked our vaccine passports as well, which is quite surprising because when I read the Green Passes and the EU Digital COVID Certificate afterwards, they said that they are checking this, but we didn't really see anyone check this when we landed from Finland. So we were still safe all the way. But then when we found out that we needed to get a Green Pass, because because I was attending a lot of these different events. And also if you read all the rules online, it says that if you want to go indoors, if you want to go inside a shop, basically do anything indoors, events, restaurants, shops, museums, you need to have this green pass or the EU digital COVID certificate. So we still had to get it. Fortunately, there is a way. So for you to be able to get it, you need to be an EU citizen vaccinated in Europe in order to be part of that system. I think they also have special ones, like they acknowledge as well a certain system in the States. So if you're a US citizen, they also acknowledge that. You just have to input the stuff online. But for us, because we're coming from the Philippines and we were vaccinated outside of the States and also outside of European Union, there wasn't any way for us to be able to get the green pass or the EU COVID digital certificate with our vaccines. We could only get that certificate if we did a swab test. Fortunately, they are okay with both antigen and PCR swab tests, and swab tests are available all around Italy's pharmacies. You'll see it at outsider pharmacy. They always have these signs that says, okay, we do swab tests. So basically, you just have to go there and they can do the swab test for you. We just got an antigen because it's also faster. So you can do the antigen swab test and your EU digital COVID certificate would be valid for 48 hours. So if you're staying longer than 48 hours, then you have to keep doing these swab tests to be able to get new certificates every 48 hours. Because once your 48 hours are up, your QR code would no longer be recognized by their machines or their apps that they use. Weirdly though, if it's not for my events, my Fashion Week events, no one asked our forms anywhere. Like Yoni went to supermarkets, we went to pharmacies, we went to stores, we went to restaurants, we were just outdoors. But yeah, we went indoors, bought stuff in stores and everything. No one really asked for them. I don't know in museums because we didn't go to any museums, but if it's just shopping you're doing, we were never asked for these green passes and EU digital COVID certificates, even though online they say that all these are required. So I'm just sharing our experience with you. No one really got this from us. I'm not saying you shouldn't get them. I think you should still get them because you don't want to be stuck outside when you want to be inside. Anyway, for Sienna though, she didn't need any of these passes or any of these certificates. She was fine to be with us and to do all sorts of things. They don't have these requirements. Again, this was at that time that we traveled. Again, I cannot stress enough, you guys should always do your research first before you fly out, especially closer to the date, because these requirements can change just like that. You know, this is our first time to be in a pandemic. Everyone's trying to adjust. Everyone's trying to, judge the situation. So a lot of these rules and restrictions are changing as we speak. Same goes for the restrictions outdoors as well. We also researched that when we got to Italy. I think for them, masks were not mandatory outside, but masks are mandatory indoors. And then after Italy, we went to Spain. For Spain, they also had their own version of their online form. It's very similar to everyone else's. It asks almost the same questions. And then after that, we would get a QR code after answering these online forms. This time though, Sienna had to get her own online form. So she did have her own QR code as well. And these QR codes were asked from us when we landed in Spain. But it was a very, very quick system. It wasn't asked by a person. They had a machine there and you just had to like put your phone there and then go in. It was very, very seamless, very fast, not a hassle at all. Spain, I think, had the same restrictions as Italy. Masks are not mandatory outdoors, but they are mandatory indoors, except of course if you're eating. And then that's basically it. So again, it's just forms, that's it. We didn't have to show our WHO vaccine passports in Spain because all they needed was the QR code. And then after that, from Spain, we were flying back home to the Philippines and we were flying with Turkish Airlines, which you guys have seen in my previous vlog. So with Turkish Airlines, they also didn't have any requirements. They follow the requirements of the country you're going to. So for us, we were going home to the Philippines and the Philippines doesn't require you to have a swab test upon landing. So we weren't required to do that. And then we also didn't have to consider Turkey's requirements as well because we were only going to be in transit. So we were just going to be in the airport. So again, it's not required. But of course, if you want to step foot outside the airport and if you're not just going there for transit, then you are required to do PCR swab tests in Turkey. So that's what Yoni was saying, that in case we missed our flight, let's say, and we had to stay there, or like a flight got canceled, then we had to get a PCR swab as well in order to be able to go out and about in Turkey. But he did research naman that the airport had a PCR swab facility, and then you can get your results in 7 hours. So this was a requirement for them. Even though you're vaccinated, you still had to get the swab test. But again, we were just gonna be there in transit, so it wasn't a requirement for us. It was very easy. All we had to do was think about the requirements for the Philippines, which is to answer the One Health Pass, which I mentioned in my previous quarantine vlog as well. So we had to fill up a health pass for all three of us. So even though Sienna is a baby, she also had to get her own health pass, her own QR code. So it's much like the Spanish system. It does give you a QR code after you fill up the form. What's weird though is that normally, if the website worked properly, is that you could also book your swab test on that same website while you're answering the form. So basically, you answer the One Health form and then you'll get an email with this link where it's connected to PadLab, which is an affiliated laboratory with BOQ. So they do your swab tests after your quarantine. For us, it was PadLab, and there was a button there in the email where you're supposed to click in order for you to pay for your swab test online. But for us, whenever we clicked it, it would show a zero amount, and then it would make you choose your payment option. We choose credit card, but no information is asked from us because again, the amount is zero. And then it would give us a message that, okay, thank you for choo, and then that's it. So it was so weird. Like at first, I was so scared that, okay, what's gonna happen? Are we not gonna be able to get our swab tests? They said that you can also pay at the airport, but we didn't see this. So traveling with a baby, it wasn't really on our minds to check for the payment of the swab tests and everything. So we got to the hotel. I'm fast forwarding, but just to tell you the story. So we got to the hotel, and that's when we realized, oh wait, how about our swab tests? No one told us about our swab tests. We didn't see any swab tests booth or anything. So then I asked around, and I asked a friend of mine who arrived a day before us, and they said that they also experienced the same thing with the One Health Pass portal. And I would assume that it wasn't working during those days that we were answering it, because I had another friend, BJ Pascual, who flew out before us, and he was fine, and he said that, yeah, I just paid online. So maybe at that time it was down. So anyway, back to my other friend, and she was saying that for them, they received a message, an SMS from PadLab saying that they're gonna be swabbed on this and that day, and to send them their information, blah blah blah. So they replied, and then that was it. So that's what also happened to us. After a few days, we received an SMS and we sent our information. We didn't get any reply back, but then they still showed up, and so we got our swab test. But anyway, I am fast forwarding, so we're done with that debacle. So you get your One Health Pass and you get your QR code. After you get your QR code, that's basically it. All the other forms that you fill up in flight are the same usual forms. So your arrival form and also your customs form. And then when you arrive, what's different is that you don't go straight to customs. There are 2 stops before customs actually. One is the Department of Health, which developed the One Health Pass, right? And they're basically just gonna ask the QR code from you and then reconfirm the information that you put in your QR code. And then after that stall, you have another stall, I think. I can't remember which stall it was, but basically you just had to have your QR code with you at all of these stops because everyone will ask these QR codes from you. So you need to be ready with these QR codes. These 2 stops, I think, you go to immigration, and it's immigration as usual. It's back to normal. And then after that, you will stop by DOT, which is Department of Tourism, I think, the next stop. And they will again ask for your QR code and also for your quarantine hotel booking. So they will take a photo of it, or they will take a record of your booking, and they will reconfirm with you how many days you're staying there, just to make sure that you have the number of days there. For us, even though we're vaccinated, we still had to get quarantined for 7 days because we were traveling with an unvaccinated minor. So if you've got a minor with you, a baby, then you are automatically supposed to quarantine for 7 days. But if you're not, then you're just quarantining for 5 days as long as you're already vaccinated. If you answer the One Health Pass form though, it does tell you that you're supposed to complete your quarantine all the way up to 10 days. But the remaining days, after your 5-day or your 7-day, you're just supposed to do at home. So if you read it properly, that's what the form is telling you. So yeah, after the DOT, Next stop is there's a Coast Guard officer by the exit of the airport, and they will again ask for your QR code, and then you'll just show them your QR code, and that's it. No one is watching you get in your car. You know, they're not like guarding you like prisoners. So yeah, once you're at the airport, your transportation is supposed to be waiting for you because again, your transport or your ride should be arranged by your quarantine hotel. So for us, it was Ascot BGC, so they arranged it for us. And then from there, we went straight to our quarantine hotel, and then the quarantine hotel procedures, you've seen it on my quarantine hotel vlog. So there you go. Whew. I've answered all your questions. And you also see on my quarantine hotel vlog that yes, babies do get swabbed as well. Sadly, Sienna did get swabbed. So how this works is that your landing day, that's already day 1. So we landed November 5. So 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So on the 7th day of our stay there, Sienna was swabbed both nostrils and twice in the mouth. For adults, you're swabbed twice for both nostrils, so that's 4 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then twice in the mouth. I think before it was like a longer process, but now they've shortened it. After your swab test, since PadLab is connected to BOQ anyways, you don't have to contact BOQ yourself. You're gonna use your details from that One Health Pass to be able to check online. So after you get your swab test, PadLab will email you your results, and then you can also use your information from your One Health Pass to check online if your certificate of release from BOQ is already up. So once you get your certificate from BOQ that you are now free to go, then you can now show that to your hotel or send it to your hotel, and your hotel will let you go and let you taste sweet, sweet freedom. That is it. So that's it. I hope that I've been able to answer all your questions when it comes to the requirements of traveling abroad. I'm sure a lot of you are also wondering, like, how is it? How did it feel? Does it feel weird? Did you feel safe? In all honesty, I felt safe. And it's very, very surprising to say that because prior to flying, I was really so paranoid. Very, very paranoid. And then I feel like after traveling to Europe, that's when I realized that, you know what? I shouldn't let fear cripple me. Yes, I should be careful, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that I shouldn't be living my life. Life after COVID or life with COVID around us is actually possible. It's actually possible for us to move on. And that's what I realized when I traveled abroad. And I feel like that's also what's slowly happening to the Philippines. We're seeing our restrictions slowly being lifted one by one. And yeah, I'm very, very excited for a lot of us to be able to experience what the other side of the world has been experiencing already, which is, you know, kids being able to go to school, babies out with their parents, people actually meeting each other, restaurants full once again. It's something that I really, really look forward to for the Philippines and for us. So yeah, it's not as scary as I thought. It's actually such an insightful trip, and I am happy we made the trip happen. That's it. I have nothing more to share. Thank you once again for joining me on today's vlog. Please make sure to leave me a comment below and give me a thumbs up. See you guys on the next vlog. Bye!